October 24th, 2025, the FBI arrests an NBA Hall of Fame coach, mafia connections, wire fraud, money laundering. Chauncey Billups, 5-time All-Star, NBA champion, Finals MVP, facing 40 years in federal prison. Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, arrested, caught faking injuries to win bets. FBI director calls it insider trading for the NBA. 34 people arrested, 11 states, tens of millions. But that's not all. The LA Clippers, under investigation for paying Kawhi Leonard $28 million under the table. Point shaving, mafia betting rings, guns, the Malice at the Palace, FBI raids. The NBA has always had a corruption problem. But what just happened? It's the biggest scandal since Tim Donaghy. I'm about to show you exactly how we got here. Before I break down this FBI investigation, you need to understand the scandals that led us here. 75 years of corruption. Let me take you back. 1951, New York. College basketball was bigger than the NBA. City College sold out Madison Square Garden, 18,000 fans. The Knicks, 8,000. But New York had 4,000 illegal bookmakers. Harry Gross was raking in $20 million a year in bets. He started bribing college players to shave points. City College won the national tournament while their players were taking bribes. But Manhattan player Junius Kellogg wore a wire, got the confession. 32 players from 7 schools confessed. Harry Gross got 8 years. Every player banned from the NBA for life, including Alex Groza, first-team All-NBA. Career destroyed. 1953, Pistons drafted Jack Molinas, made the All-Star team as a rookie. Then he bet on his own games. Banned for life. But 1957, Molinas partnered with the Genovese crime family. They'd befriend college players, throw parties with alcohol and women, then bribe them to fix games. 50 players, 27 teams, 4 years. FBI arrested him. Future Hall of Famers. Connie Hawkins and Roger Brown were implicated. The Mafia had infiltrated basketball. Fast forward, 1999, Minnesota Timberwolves. And this is exactly what the Clippers are being investigated for with Kawhi Leonard. The Wolves signed Joe Smith to a short contract under market value, while promising him $86 million later under the table. Take less now, we'll pay you later. Agent lawsuit exposed it. David Stern destroyed them. $3.5 million fine. Voided contracts. 5 first-round picks. Gone. Now the Clippers? Accused of the same thing. 2021, owner Steve Ballmer invested $50 million in a company called Aspiration. That company signed Kawhi to a $28 million no-show endorsement deal. Kawhi didn't have to do anything. Deal was void if Kawhi left the Clippers. Then in 2024, Kawhi signed below max value. NBA is investigating. 25 years later, same crime. 1990s, University of Michigan, the Fab Five, Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard, reached the championship game twice, changed basketball culture, but they were taking illegal payments. Booster Ed Martin gave over $600,000 to players. Michigan vacated their Final Fours. Banners came down. Webber pled guilty to lying to a grand jury. September 2017. The FBI dropped a bomb. Adidas executives paying recruits to attend Adidas schools, funneling money through AAU coaches. Rick Pitino at Louisville. The FBI had wiretaps proving $100,000 was paid to a recruit's family. October 2017. Pitino was fired. Sean Miller at Arizona implicated. 10 people arrested. The FBI exposed what everyone knew. College recruiting was pay to play. December 2009. Gilbert Arenas and Javaris Crittenton argued over a gambling debt. Arenas brought 4 guns to the locker room. Said, pick one. Crittenton pulled out his own gun. Arenas pled guilty to a felony. Crittenton never played again. But the worst violence? November 19th, 2004. Malice at the Palace. Pacers up by 15. Ron Artest fouls Ben Wallace. Wallace shoves him. A fan throws a cup. Hits. Artist. Artist charges into the stands. Full brawl. Ron Artest. 86 games. Longest suspension in NBA history. 2019. Former players Terrence Williams, Big Baby Davis, Will Bynum, and 16 others ran a health insurance scam. Fake medical claims. $4 million in fraud. FBI caught them. Williams got 10 years in prison. They scammed their own union. 75 years. Point shaving that killed college basketball's golden era. The Mafia rigging games for decades. Salary cap fraud. FBI raids. Guns in locker rooms. The ugliest brawl in sports history. Insurance fraud. Tim Donaghy betting on his own games. Jonte Porter banned for life in 2024. The The NBA has been corrupt since day one, but what the FBI just uncovered makes all of this look like child's play. October 24th, 2025. The FBI announced arrests that will change the NBA forever. Let me tell you exactly what happened. Thursday morning, October 24th, 2025. FBI agents executed coordinated arrests across 11 states, 34 people. FBI Director Kash Patel held a press conference. Let me not mince words. This is the insider trading saga for the NBA. Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, arrested in Orlando, appeared in court wearing a Charlotte Hornets sweatshirt, handcuffs, shackles. Portland Trail Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups, arrested in Oregon. Hall of Famer, five-time All-Star, NBA champion, Finals MVP. Former player Damon Jones, arrested, named in both indictments. Both Billups and Rozier charged with wire fraud conspiracy and money laundering conspiracy. Each count, up to 20 years. That's 40 years maximum. The NBA immediately placed both on indefinite leave. Statement: we take these allegations with the utmost seriousness, and the integrity of our game remains our top priority. Trailblazers assistant Tiago Splitter named interim head coach. The season had just started 3 days earlier. 2 separate investigations. Investigation 1, illegal sports betting using insider NBA info. 6 defendants, including Rozier and Jones. Investigation 2, Mafia-rigged poker games. 31 defendants, including Billups and Jones. Let's start with Terry Rozier. His scheme is insane. March 23rd, 2023. Rozier playing for Charlotte. Before their game against the Pelicans, Rozier contacts his childhood friend Danilo Laster. I'm pulling myself out in the first quarter. Fake injury. Laster sells this info to 2 bettors for $100,000. Those bettors and their network place hundreds of thousands on Rozier's unders. Rozier plays 9 minutes, 5 points, 2 assists, 4 rebounds, then checks out, claims he's sick. The bets win. Rozier paid for Laster to fly to Philadelphia to collect the cash. Laster drove to Rozier's house. They counted the money together. But it wasn't just one game. The indictment alleges they used insider info to bet on at least 7 NBA games between March 2023 and March 2024. Hornets, Magic, Trailblazers, Lakers, Raptors. In 3 of those games, players intentionally removed themselves to benefit the bets. U.S. Attorney Joseph Nocella, one of the most brazen sports corruption schemes since online betting became legalized. Now Damon Jones, and sources say he might be the NBA's biggest liability. Jones played for 10 NBA teams, coached for multiple organizations. He knows everybody across the league. The indictment says Jones had a close relationship with a prominent NBA player. ESPN confirmed it was LeBron James. February 9th, 2023. Lakers hosting the Bucks. Jones texts a co-conspirator, "Get a big bet on Milwaukee tonight." He's out. LeBron didn't play. Lakers lost. Bettors cleaned up. Then Jones texts, "Make sure you bet enough for D. Jones to get a taste. He wants his cut." Here's critical. LeBron did nothing wrong. Jones probably called him like a friend. "Hey man, you playing tonight?" LeBron casually said, "Nah, I'm banged up." Taking the night off? Normal conversation. LeBron had no idea Jones was selling it. But here's the NBA's nightmare. Jones knows players from 10 teams. He's been asking everybody for info, casual questions, innocent conversations. Sources believe Jones contacted dozens of players, got injury information, lineup info, and those players gave it thinking they were just talking to a friend. Jones is charged in both indictments, betting and poker. But the damage to the NBA's integrity? Still being uncovered. This is the blast radius the league fears. Now, the really crazy part, Chauncey Billups and Mafia-rigged poker. Billups isn't in the betting indictment. But there's a co-conspirator 8 who played 1997 to 2014, coached since 2021, lives in Oregon. That's Billups. Perfect match. Those charges could be coming. The main charges, the poker scheme. 3 New York Mafia families, Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese. Starting April 2019, they ran underground high-stakes poker in Manhattan. But every game was rigged card shuffling machines. The machine reads the cards, transmits info to an off-site operator. That operator relays it to a quarterback at the table who signals the other cheaters. Tap your arm if you have the best hand. Touch your $1,000 chip if another cheater does. Touch your black chips if the fish, the victim, has it. Everyone folds. They also used X-ray tables, hidden cameras, special contact lenses to see marked cards, and Chauncey Billups. He was a face card. The Mafia hired him to sit at the table to make it look legitimate. If you're a wealthy businessman and a Hall of Famer is playing, you trust it's legit. One game in April 2019, conspirators texted they were worried the victim was getting suspicious because Billups won 2 unlikely hands. One said the victim was starstruck by Billups and kept playing even while losing. Victims lost at least $7.15 million. One victim alone lost $1.8 million in 2 months. The Mafia used their typical tactics: threatened victims who didn't pay debts, extorted others by invoking mob connections, laundered proceeds through shell companies and cryptocurrency. Billups faces wire fraud and money laundering. Prosecutors noted he has substantial financial resources and requested substantial bail conditions. Remember co-conspirator 8 in the betting indictment? Oregon resident, played 1997 to 2014, coach since 2021. That's Billups. Co-conspirator 8 allegedly told a bettor before a March 2023 Trailblazers game that Portland would be tanking and players would be held out with injuries. Bettors used that info to bet against the Blazers. They won. Billups hasn't been formally charged in the betting scheme yet, but if that's him, and it seems obvious, those charges are coming. So what happens now? Billups. Court appearance. November 24th. Rozier, December 8th. Both surrendered passports. Both on bond. Both prohibited from gambling. If convicted, up to 40 years each. But here's what most don't know. Federal prosecutors say more indictments are coming. This is only the tip of the iceberg. The NBA sent a memo to all 30 teams about dire risks from gambling. They're implementing AI monitoring systems, tracking every bet in real time. They might ban certain prop bets entirely. This reached Congress, lawmakers calling for federal regulation. Since 2018, at least 23 athletes or coaches suspended for gambling violations. And inside the Trailblazers, GM Joe Cronin held an emergency meeting. Sources say players were mute, shocked, dead silence. Cronin said, "No one contact Billups." Splitter stepped up. "The goals remain the same. I'm in charge." Friday night, one day after Billups' arrest, the Blazers destroyed the Warriors 139 to 119. First win of the season, but players across the league are heartbroken. Jason Tatum, Rozier's former teammate, "It's tough to see. We work so hard. The game is so important, and people are just messing around." Another former teammate, "Basketball's changed our lives. You never would think somebody would play with a game like this. It's heartbreaking." The FBI sent a message. They're watching. They're not afraid to take down Hall of Famers. Chauncey Billups' legacy is destroyed. Terry Rozier's career is over. The only question? How many more are out there? 75 years of corruption. But this scandal is different because the FBI is not done. November 24th, Billups in court. What will he reveal to save himself? Who will he give up? December 8th, Rozier faces sentencing, but the prosecutors have a list of players Damon Jones contacted, a list of games that were compromised, a list of teams under investigation. And that list? It's about to go public. Federal agents told ESPN, "This is only the beginning. We have evidence that will shock the NBA. More arrests are coming. More players will be exposed. More teams will be investigated. The NBA is bracing for the biggest integrity crisis in sports history." Here's what I know that I can't tell you yet. There are 3 more active players currently under FBI investigation. The league knows who they are. The teams know who they are. And soon, we will all know who was involved. In part 2, I'm revealing everything. The court testimonies, the secret recordings, the text messages the FBI recovered, the players who flipped, the coaches who cooperated, and the one superstar whose name keeps coming up in the investigation. Was it LeBron, Wade, Garnett? This is the biggest story in basketball, and it's far from over. Subscribe now, turn on all notifications, because when part 2 drops, everything you think you know about the NBA will change. The corruption runs deeper than you think, and I'm about to prove it. The smoke is fading. Part 2 is coming.